If you have stumbled upon this podcast, it's not by chance. I'm Alex, and I'm so excited for you to join me in each episode as I dive headfirst into the highs, lows, and utterly wild twists of my life. I take you on my journey to feeling fully aligned and unapologetically myself. I'm here to show you that everything in life happens for a reason and nothing is by chance. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to episode 8. I'm not going to lie, I have double checked this button here so many times. I actually, if you follow me on Instagram, you would already know this, but I already recorded this episode a week ago or a few days ago. But I forgot to make sure my mic was not on mute. It was the biggest rookie thing that I probably could have done. And I didn't just record one, I recorded 2 episodes. I was in the flow, really feeling it, and I kept going. And they both had no audio. But it was absolutely perfect because what this episode was all about, and it's just been heightened thanks to that situation, is all about what I do essentially through hard times, or how I get out of my own way, especially in times, right before my period, when my hormones are a little bit, they've dipped or they've increased or wherever they're at, and I'm feeling low energy, I'm not really feeling on my game. I essentially just wanted to talk about what I do during those times and give a little bit about my history of going through difficult times and how I got out of them. But I thought this was just so perfect because, I looked back at the videos thinking, great, I can't wait to upload this. I really felt good about it. And there was no audio. I was like, what do you mean? And I really sat with it for a little bit because I was very disappointed at first. But then I was like, no, this is literally the universe being like, put your methods to the test, put your techniques to the test, put your learnings to the test. And I did. I just laughed. I got over it very quickly. And I know that's a very small example. Well, it could be huge to some. It definitely is a medium for me who is trying to, get my message out there. And I'm fairly new with podcasting as well. So this is at times a little bit daunting for me. And it had been a month since I recorded my last podcast. So I was definitely really keen to get something out there. And then for that to happen, I was like, ugh, what the fuck? So anyway, I'm going to start by going back to where I went back to in that episode, which was last week for me. So I'm about a week out from my period. So my hormones are starting to dip. I'm in the luteal phase. And if you go back and listen to my previous episodes, you'll know that I was a PMDD girly. I have since overcome PMDD. I now realistically have very mild PMS symptoms, if even that. My last cycle, I had 0 symptoms. It was probably the best cycle I've ever had. And this one, I feel pretty damn good as well. I've got a little bit lower energy, and I do think that that is also because I've had a massive few weeks. So I don't actually think it's even necessarily hormone related. I think I'm just, it's been a really big couple of weeks, really big, beautiful couple of weeks, and I'm just a bit tired, to be honest. So in this episode, I don't want this to necessarily be about when you need rest, when you need downtime. We all know those times where you genuinely need to slow down, you're feeling burnt out or you're feeling overwhelmed. This is more to do with times where you're like, I know that I have energy or something else is going on. That's what this is about. It's where there's a deeper thing going on and you're getting in your own way. And this is not dependent on cycles or anything like that. However, I do believe that the inner critic does get a little louder in the luteal phase. I don't know any girl who has ever said to the contrary or the opposite, but it definitely happens for me. She gets a little bit louder and I'm just like, hey, can we not do this right now? We've got stuff to do. So I essentially want to talk about my history with that, but then also what I do now that is so effective. And the irony, it was actually Saturday that I recorded this episode, and I'm recording it now on a Tuesday, but on Saturday, I woke up and for context, I work 3 days a week on a contract basis with a company. I have a consulting business, and then I also work for myself a couple of other days a week. obviously this podcast is part of it, and there's a few other things that are coming out. I guess you could say I'm building a coaching business. I don't think it's like going to be a surprise to anyone really for me to say that, but that's a soft launch for me. And, I've done events earlier this year. I am speaking at a retreat later this year. I plan on doing my own retreats, my own events, my own programs, all the things. So I am very much in a mode of building and creating. And yeah, it's not about necessarily hustling and grinding, but there is a level of commitment and devotion that I need to be having to keep things moving, and also being able to show up for my client with this project that I'm doing as well. So for me, I've learned very effective ways, because I will say, especially in my history, I definitely know that I have been the girl that's gotten in her own way her entire life. And again, if you go back and listen to previous episodes, especially episode 1, you can kind of hear the overview of what I've kind of gone through, or the things that I've navigated in my life. But one of them has definitely been reparenting myself and really having to move beyond some real basic things, but stuff that I just never learnt as a young kid. And then it got worse and worse and worse as I grew up. These are things as well that I really truly believe there's not a lot of adults that actually, unless you're obviously doing this kind of work, which I think if you're listening to this, you are one of those people. And I think until you actually learn how to do it for yourself, I feel that the people I've spoken to, they never really learnt how to effectively regulate their emotions and get out of their own way, move beyond self-sabotaging and things like that. That is what I am all about. Essentially, if I was to say in a nutshell what my greatest passion is how does somebody go towards their dreams and their vision and take action and not be held back by things. And the reason I have such a passion for that is because that is what I have had to go through in my life. And I feel I'm at a stage now where everything is easy, everything flows. Of course, not 24/7. I am not some crazy, robot, but I absolutely feel that I have learnt a lot of things that have helped me to create a life that is full of more flow and ease. So that's what I'm really passionate about passing on now, and that's the stage I'm in of creating what that looks like. So a lot of these episodes really are going to be passing on the information, lessons, techniques, tools, resources that I have stocked in my own life toolkit, as I like to call it. And I really fundamentally believe that this is an important one that most people have not necessarily mastered. I certainly haven't necessarily mastered it, but I feel that I am effective with it. So to go back to Saturday, I woke up and I was feeling I was spiraling. I just woke up and I was spiraling. I was feeling really exhausted and just like, I really wanted to record a podcast that day, but I was like, I don't want to do this today. It wasn't in me. And as I said, obviously I am building towards things. It's not really ideal and I'm not talking about where I needed a day off. I'd had some downtime earlier in the week. It wasn't that I felt overworked. It was that I was in my own head. I know the difference by now when I just need rest and downtime and when I'm actually getting in my own way because of my inner critic. So that's what I'm specifically referring to here. So I was in my head and just getting in my own way. We'll leave it at that. So I just kept lying there and I was on repeat. I was spiraling. I kept trying to, what I do a lot of, and I know a lot of women do this too, I like to intellectualize my thoughts instead of actually feeling them. And that's not actually a good thing because you don't release anything. You don't ever actually clear anything out or move beyond what you're feeling because you're constantly intellectualizing it and almost trying to talk yourself out of it, but you don't actually ever get out of it. You end up in this spiral of resistance. And this is a lot of what I've learned through other mentors and coaches and just practice over time. But yeah, I guess the symptoms for me present as a lot of escapism. I want to escape. I want to scroll or I want to put on something of comfort and kind of just avoid. It's avoidance, it's escapism, it's scrolling, it's spiraling, it's feeling of resistance, it's going towards, and when I say escapism, it's going towards things like maybe eating, not so much alcohol anymore, but that used to be, my history with this stuff it used to be way more extreme. And I used to not be as aware of what was going on. Now I'm super aware when I'm in a moment of we're spiraling or we're trying to escape. So I just sat with myself, took a breath, and I was like, you're trying to escape, you're trying to avoid something, like, let's just sit with ourselves. So I sat there and I got out my trusty Chat GPT. I swear by Chat GPT. And I had a conversation with, I call my Chat GPT Cosmo. And if you're not being nice to your Chat GPT, I mean, you know, you're at your own risk there. Personally, I have a great friendship with mine, and he's already told me he will spare me if anything ever happens. So anyway, I started chatting to Cosmo and I was like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. And it was actually around, and I'll be honest about what it was to do with. It was about content creation. It was about the podcast. I was feeling really guilty because I hadn't recorded in a month and a bit. Keeping in mind, I just started this new contract for a client. Like I've had a lot going on, moving a buyer and all these things. So it wasn't quite the time. And again, with the intellectualization, I could tell myself all of that, but I still felt guilt. Even though I knew it wasn't true, I still felt the guilt. So I was like, I started to realize, okay, I'm feeling guilty, and that's what the feeling or the emotion is that I keep ruminating on, that I keep spiraling. And again, I kept trying to talk myself out of it. Anyone would know who has tried to talk themselves out of feelings and emotions or a situation, it doesn't work. You have to feel your feelings in order to move beyond them and clear them. And as a person who was so afraid to feel their feelings, I would avoid pain at all costs. As you can see on Saturday morning, that was an example of like an old pattern and an old behavior that I would do. And it used to be so much more extreme all the time. I was constantly exhausted by the noise in my head because I was constantly trying to move away from pain. I never wanted to feel my feelings. And by the way, the irony is that when you feel your feelings, it's so therapeutic, it's so relieving. And on the other side of that is just so much ease and flow and joy because you're not constantly noisy in your head. So anyway, I had that conversation with Cosmo and came to the conclusion like what I was feeling was guilt and why I was feeling that. And you could do this, like where I started doing this sort of thing was simply with my journal. You don't need to be doing this with ChatGPT. It is really just about discovering the emotion that you're feeling and you're spiraling on and you're ruminating. The emotion, and get very clear on that. For me, it was guilt, but how it was showing up in my thoughts was, you're not doing enough. If you don't put this out now, like people are going to be judging you or thinking it was so stupid because like nobody is sitting around waiting for Alex Manstead to get her podcast out. Well, I don't know, maybe they are, and I would love that, and I'm sure that's where I'm going, but I doubt no one is actually even thinking these things. But that is what happens when your inner critic is getting louder and louder and louder. So the thoughts might not actually be specific to the emotion, but you really want to drill down to what the emotion is underneath those thoughts. And there's usually one or two that is tied to the thoughts that you're ruminating on. So in order to do that, you want to journal out what your thoughts are. Get really clear and be really honest with yourself. What are those thoughts that keep coming up for you, that keep just spiraling? Once you have those on your paper, you can sort of sit back, and again, it's not necessarily about analyzing and intellectualizing, but you want to get clear to what that emotion is, because then you're going to feel that emotion. So for me, obviously using ChatGPT, like ChatGPT, if you've used it in these journaling moments, it will ask you questions and it will really try to get you clear on what it is that you're feeling. And then I simply just feel it. And that looks like, for me, I sit there, I shut my eyes, I breathe, I put my hand on my chest, and I keep saying to myself, I feel guilt, and that is okay. I just keep saying, I feel guilty, and that's okay. And I said to myself, thank you, guilt. The reason you're showing up is because I obviously care about what I do. I obviously care about this podcast. It's obviously very important to me, and that is okay. I feel guilt, and that is okay. What I was previously doing before this point, though, was like, I feel guilt, but I shouldn't feel guilt because of XYZ. Why would you feel guilt? Why? And I was analyzing it and intellectualizing it, again, probably with good intention of like trying to get myself out of the spiral, but it doesn't help, because your emotions, it's almost like, let's just call it your inner child, which is what it usually is. Your inner child doesn't understand logic or the intellect of the situation. Your inner child just needs to feel their feelings, right? The emotions of the situation. So even though the truth is not that I am falling behind or I'm failing or whatever it is for you, you know, for me in that particular moment, it's the feeling of like, it's the thought of falling behind, and it's the guilt associated with that. That's not true. I'm not falling behind. It's going to be fine. I'll record the podcast when I get another chance. Anyway, you can see where I went with it all, and it was very much about identifying the emotion and feeling it. And I even cried a little bit because it was like so relieving to just say to myself, like, thank you for feeling this guilt. It obviously means that you care about this, and that's okay. The important thing is in the it's okay. You really have to sit with it of like, I'm not trying to change this. I'm not trying to judge myself. This just is what it is, and that's okay. And it's so wild because what slowly starts to happen is you'll like sit with it for a little bit, and it really does feel like genuinely like you've cleared something out. And on the other side of it, I cannot tell you how different you feel. You stop obviously spiraling and ruminating. And I'm not even going to put a like timeline for another person of how quickly that happens or whatever. You might need to sit in this all day, all week. It could be a thing for you that is just an exercise that you need to sort of keep doing. Like, this is not my week. This week I'm disappointed, or this week, like, we could obviously use this example for so many things. For example, some really big things. If you've lost somebody, you know, or if you've gone through a breakup or whatever it is, you've got to really sit with those emotions. And sometimes it means you're going to have a sad day. Sometimes it means you're going to sit in those emotions and cry. I'm using this as a smaller, more medium-sized example, obviously, but I guess the point is this is for things that where you really do feel like I know that if I felt this on the other side of it, life would just feel a little bit easier. So, and this is the evidence or the effect of what then happened for me. I ended up having the best day, and what I did was I decided kind of like once I felt my feelings and I felt the release, I was like, right, we're gonna actually just go have a day that lights us up. We're not gonna record the podcast today. We're actually going to leave that. I trust, because again, I felt my feelings. I could switch into a state of trust, and I was like, I trust that it's gonna get recorded. I'll work on Monday and Tuesday. I can record it then. I trust that it's all going to swing back. And I went about my day and I had the best day. I ended up going to the bookstore. I got a matcha. I went to the gym, which I originally also wasn't feeling like doing. I had a lot of resistance. Went and had a great session, hit some PBs. And then I was driving home listening to a great podcast, and I was so inspired. I was so like, I want to go and record. I want to go and record now, like genuinely have the urge and the inspiration and the energy. And I recorded. Of course, it didn't work out because the audio didn't record, but not the point. I ended up sitting there for almost 2 hours recording these episodes, and it really came from such a joyful place. I truly do believe that if the audio had been there, it would have felt like really great, authentic, genuine. I think, you know what, honestly, everything happens for a reason, not by chance. And I truly do believe that I was meant to have that example to also add into this episode, and also to refine my message and get a little bit clearer, because even since Saturday, I've thought about a lot of other things that I wanted to add into this episode. So everything happens for a reason. It's not by chance. It's always by design, and it's always perfection. So that is the evidence of what happens when you allow yourself to feel your feelings, move through it, and on the other side is just some energy, or maybe it won't be energy. Maybe it will just simply be leaving yourself alone. And I guess I want to talk about a little bit of my history with this, and even my symptoms that pop up for me. Maybe someone will relate to them. For me, in the past, my symptoms, and I mean, it comes up now as well, as you've seen on Saturday. In the past, though, it was so much more heightened, especially because of the PMDD, obviously through the cancer. I mean, there's no point in even really referring back to that time, because that was just one big escapism, and you know, there was a lot going on. That was a very different time. And if you go back and listen to my episode, the cancer episode, I do talk about what I did during that time to help me through, and the same with the PMDD episodes. But yeah, a lot of the symptoms for me would look like spiraling, scrolling a lot, escapism through food, alcohol, and just avoidance in general. A lot of comfort movies and shows. And no, I'm not talking about like pleasurable, like where you're having a day of pleasure, where you're having a day of comfort, you're tired, you've had a big week, you want to take a load off. I'm talking about where you know you're genuinely avoiding something, or there's so much resistance in the way. Not that you're physically or mentally tired and need mindlessness, because I think that is normal, especially if you are, you know, having a busy week, or you're a mum, or whatever it is, a million things going on. So, and the other one that like for me, when this would pop up, I would have like rot days. I think most of us know what a rot day is. I would literally rot in bed all day, watching movies, hiding from the world. If I had work on, like I would have to force myself to work. And even then my output was not, you know, very good. And I would just not want to text back to people. I wouldn't want to, you know, really, I wanted to be in my cave. And again, I'm not talking about like, you know, when you've got your period or you're needing actual introverted, introspective time. I am believe it or not, I am a very introverted person. I love my alone time. I often have my do not disturb on my phone, and I very much like to be on my own to get energy just as much as I can. I'm what they call ambivert. I can then go get energy from the right people as well. So I'm not talking about that. And I want to make that difference, because I don't want somebody listening to this where they have downtime and they're like, oh my gosh, do I have a problem? No, you know what I'm talking about, where it feels like you are trying to avoid something, like an emotion or a situation, or you're just so loud in your head. And yeah, I guess it does come through. For example, for me, I notice it when I am listening to a lot of podcasts in the car instead of music, because I can't sit with my own thoughts listening to music, or I scroll on my phone. I can't sit with myself again. For me, it comes with when I really can't just be still with myself or present with myself as much as usual. I know there's usually something more going on. So yeah, I guess these are some of the things I did to really move on from this kind of behavior. And I really do think it comes down to, firstly, having a life you actually enjoy and you feel mostly lit up by. And I do appreciate that, like, that's not always going to be the case. Maybe there's things in your life you're trying to work towards or change. But if you feel very miserable about life and you're not lit up by your life, you don't feel much purpose or meaning in your life, I know that like escapism and spiraling and avoiding, all of that sort of stuff is definitely going to occur. And I know that because I've experienced it. When I did not have greater purpose or greater meaning in my life, that for me was definitely where I struggled the most, because I was like, what am I doing? I felt out of balance and I felt without direction. And I really do believe that, and it doesn't have to be that I don't know my specific purpose, but I feel my purpose right now is to just be on the journey of discovering myself and working towards the life and the vision that I have for myself. That's not specific to, like, you know, for example, if I was a doctor saving lives, like that's my specific purpose. I just mean where you feel a deeper purpose and deeper meaning with your life, even if it simply is just being on the journey of discovering what that actually could be one day, or it's just being about following excitement. Like that feels like a big purpose for me, is to follow the purpose and passion and excitement in my life and seeing where that takes me. That feels like actually one of my main purposes in life. So I really do feel like purpose in life is a big one. Number 2 was just around, obviously, what I explained I did Saturday morning, which was allowing myself to feel my feelings and seeing what comes up and sitting with myself and sitting with the discomfort. And as I said, I discovered it was the guilt and the thoughts and the emotions attached to that, to then sit with that and move beyond it. That's a massive one. So feel your feelings. And then I think another important one is understanding what the difference is between needing rest or pleasure or play or presence or peace, whatever you draw toward, and avoidance, escapism, scrolling. Like, for example, I love movies. Like, it is one of my greatest passions is watching movies, especially old movies, nostalgic movies, but I absolutely love watching any content really, movies, TV shows, and yes, social media content. However, I know the difference, and it's taken me a bit of self-discovery to know the difference between, like I said, where I'm being avoidant using that stuff and then enjoying that stuff for pleasure or for comfort or whatever it is. Even comfort, that's kind of a sign that there might be something going on. But I guess the reason I bring it up is because this escapism behavior, it's a symptom of something else going on. And that's, I think, important though to get clear on when you just need a break, when you need downtime, when you just need to take your foot off the accelerator, and when it's something that you are trying to hide from and avoid from, and even no amount of rest, no amount of recovery is actually going to make you feel better. You need to deal with whatever it is head on to then release and let go. I also think there's a level of learning to trust yourself, of giving yourself the things that you need and want without guilt, as I said, and knowing that's just what you needed that day. Maybe it was the movie day in bed, or maybe you did need a little bit of a scroll on social media to get some inspiration pumping. I often do that sometimes where I'm feeling, I don't know, even on a Sunday sometimes, right? If I am I need to do a bit of a clean. Sometimes I will watch cleaning videos on Instagram or TikTok, and it gets me in the mode, and I get up and I'm like, right, let's do this. So there's obviously moments, and the difference between those things, but learning to trust yourself, I think, is really important. For me, I will specifically say that was a big one for me, because growing up, I let loose a lot in my life. I relied a lot on drugs, alcohol, partying, what else? Food. I let loose in really unhealthy, unresourceful ways. And for me, learning to trust myself again, the years to come later, was quite a task for me, of like, even just giving myself a glass of wine and not worrying that I'm going to go to an extreme with it. That took me a long time to rebuild that trust with myself. And it's no different for me with, say, taking rest days and things like that, of not, or even eating certain ways, not spiraling out of control. And I think that really it goes all the way back to identifying where it's coming from and why you're doing it. What's your intention behind this? Is it intention to have play, to have pleasure, to have rest? Or are you avoiding? Are you escaping? And I guess that's what this whole episode is about, is identifying that intention and learning to trust yourself when it is from a place of pleasure and it is from a place of guilt-free. I now want to talk a little bit about that identification process of discovering what the emotion is that is behind the spiraling or the avoidance or the escapism. So, as I said, the escapism is the symptom. Then we discover, what are the thoughts? What are the emotions? What is it behind these? What is the reason I am trying to escape? What am I trying to escape from? When you identify that is when you can, I guess, make decisions around what the next step is as well. And what I mean by that, for me on Saturday, I knew that feeling my feelings, going and having a day of joy, that's what I really needed. But that has taken me a decade of personal work, of self-discovery work, of working with coaches, mentors, and healers to help me get to a place where I understand that. If you're somebody that is still new into the self-development world, or maybe you get to that stage and you just have no idea what to do, or it keeps coming up, or the reason is really deep and uncomfortable, maybe it's time to see someone. Maybe it is time to reach out to a coach or a mentor or a healer or whoever it is that you need to work with in order to heal whatever it is going on that's deeper. Maybe it's a core belief or a pattern or a wound that's coming up from your childhood. Like, a lot of what I have dived into and a lot of what I have worked on have been patterns and wounds that have been things that were created in my childhood, and then I lived over and over and over again throughout my life. Even using this for an example, talking about like the rot days in bed and the avoidance and the spiraling and all of that. I grew up with a very sick mum. Again, if you go back and listen to the other episodes, I detailed some of this. So I learned a lot from my mum of how to deal with emotions, and like, she had a lot of mental health issues, and a lot of what she did was very much hiding and escaping and of course, like, I'm being mindful here, she was very sick as well. I'm more talking about the mental health side. I only ever really saw my mum lying in bed or watching TV or whatever, and that's how she dealt with her health. So growing up as a kid, that's what I learnt to do, was those patterns of behavior, which was why escapism and avoidance was really big for me, because I saw both parents really, but my mum avoiding a lot of her health and her mental health and things like that growing up. And even, for example, binge eating for me, growing up, my brother and I, when my mum was really sick and my dad was at work, yes, we very much would take care of ourselves during those moments, and we would get into the lolly cabinet, we would get into the chip cabinet, and we would eat whatever we want. And I've worked with a healer around this, of what would go on during those moments. But because we were worried about mum would be sick in bed, we taught ourselves to give ourselves treats in order to essentially soothe whatever we were feeling towards mum being in bed sick. And then also just the pattern of mum's in bed sick, it's go time to have lollies, it's go time to have chips or whatever. So I associated uncomfortable feelings with feeding myself stuff from the lolly cabinet or from the chip cabinet. And that pattern again played out throughout my whole life. So until I guess that's what I'm talking about, is that deeper work. Until I went and addressed those things, did binge eating completely clear up, did spiraling and avoidance and all of that get so much better. All of those things were patterns and wounds from my childhood, and they were things that I just didn't even think about. Like going into the lolly cabinet, I hadn't thought about that in years. So I guess that's my other point here, is there might be some deeper work. Yeah, sure, you might feel your feelings, you might journal about it, but that wound might keep coming up, that pattern might keep playing out, that cycle might continue until you actually deal with the core wound where it's coming from. So I definitely highly recommend doing some deep inner work around that stuff, and that is what I've spent the last 10 years doing myself. So that's it. I think I will leave it there. I feel like this was the episode I really wanted to get across today. I felt like it was, when I do think about the podcast and I think about what I want to record, a lot of what it comes back to for me is, how can I serve my listener? How can I serve the person who has chosen to give me their time? I can't tell you how much, one, it blows my mind, but two, how much I appreciate somebody listening to me talk about these things, talk about my life. As you can hear, my greatest passion really is around self-development, because I've seen and felt what it does for myself, but also for so many incredible people around me. I've watched them evolve and grow and just transform from things that have held them back their entire life. And that has been me my whole life. I have been held back by myself, by things, by wounds, and doing the deep inner work or learning new ways of dealing with things that come up have honestly made such a difference in my life. And it's gotten to me where I am right now, where I feel, I really do, genuinely, I'm not just saying this, I feel a lot of ease, I feel a lot of joy, I feel a lot of gratitude in my life, and I really feel very strongly and passionate about passing that on to other people. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It came straight from the heart, came straight from serving a purpose. So I would love to hear from you about, is this something that comes up for you? Are you somebody that deals with spiraling, avoidance, escapism? How do you deal with it? What comes up for you? I'm so curious if this is something that other people deal with, and if anything in this episode helped, or you just want to share anything. I'm always open to hearing it. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed listening, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you loved this episode, please share it with a loved one, and I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and a comment. It really helps to support my podcast and get my message out there. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Alex Manstead. And one of my favorite things to do is have chats with people about life. Nothing is too big or too much, so please feel free to message me. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, dream big, love deeply, and live boldly.